Right, hi everybody. Welcome back and good afternoon. This should be my final video on topic 4.4, water pollution, and therefore the final video on topic 4 itself, which was water and aquatic food production systems and societies. And in this one, I want to look at water pollution management strategies. It should be a short one because, as you can see above my head, there's only 3 strategies that I want to cover. One is reducing pollution in the first place by changing human activities. Number 2 is regulating the pollution to try and reduce it as much as possible. And number 3 is removing the pollution once it's occurred to try to restore an ecosystem. So I've called it the 3 R's. What I want to do is, after I've shown you the syllabus, I want to give you an example, and my example will be eutrophication of a river. And then I want to look at how those 3 strategies could be applied in order to solve a eutrophication problem in an imaginary river. Obviously, the 3 strategies are not mutually exclusive. You can use all 3 together, or you can use one. That kind of depends on what the source of the pollution is and what the best way to tackle it would be. Okay, so let's take a look at the syllabus. I've changed the wording slightly to incorporate my 3 R's. But that hasn't really changed the wording a lot in terms of what the syllabus says. So in terms of knowledge and understanding, it says the application of water pollution management strategies include 1. Reduce human activities that produce the pollution in the first place. Number 2, regulate the release of that pollution into the environment. Try to reduce it as much as possible. And number 3, remove pollutants from the environment and therefore restore ecosystems. I won't read through the examples there, you can yourself, because I want to apply these to my own example, which, as I said, is eutrophication. Under applications and skills, it asks us, as usual, the obligatory evaluation question to evaluate all of these strategies against each other, and we'll leave that to the class as usual. Okay, so I've got 3 slides, and each slide I've put one strategy. So let's start with reduce human activity. So depending on what the source of the pollution is, let's say it's farmland, or it could be gardens, golf courses. What you might consider is forcing people to avoid the overuse of fertilizer. If you only apply the correct amount of fertilizer to your crop, or to your grass, or to your golf course, you reduce the runoff so much that you could solve the problem of eutrophication there. Another thing you can do is match carefully the fertilizer to the crop you're growing. Different crops require different concentrations of nitrogen and phosphorus in particular, and potassium. So therefore you can carefully choose which fertilizer is correct, and in doing so reduce runoff and leaching of fertilizer by rain as much as possible. Another obvious thing you can do is to reduce the use of fertilizer during the rainy season. So in the Northern Hemisphere that would be February, March. So therefore when the rains come, they're washing less fertilizer off the land. You could plant legumes instead of the use of synthetic fertilizer. We already talked about this as part of the nitrogen cycle. Legumes are plants that have bacteria in their root systems that can put nitrogen into the soil. Obvious things again, don't keep animals close to water bodies. Don't plough up grassland because that will release nitrogen, so reduce ploughing as much as possible. When we look at soil systems, you'll see that there are different methods of soil husbandry that keep nitrogen inside the soil and don't allow it to be removed. And then another very, very obvious one, don't plant crops on very sloping land because that will be very prone to runoff, surface runoff. Okay, number 2, second strategy, regulate. I've put here that part of regulation can be the use of public campaigns, the work of NGOs especially, but basically this strategy means accepting that the pollution is going into your water source, but trying to reduce it as much as possible by regulation. So let's go through some of these examples that I've come up with. So number one, if the source of your pollution is sewage, especially in terms of nitrogen, nitrates, you can introduce technologies at sewage works that take nitrates out of the water. Very simple technologies actually is just to add agents like iron that basically stick to your nitrates, form iron nitrate or iron phosphate, and then you can just skim off the precipitate, the solid chemical that forms. You could persuade people to switch to phosphate-free detergents if the source is people's houses, people's washing. Encourage people not to overuse detergents, phosphate-rich detergents, by only washing a full load of washing. Similar to the previous one, try to reduce the amount of fertilizers used in public places. Introduce punishments for people not picking up animal poo. And a very nice one actually is to, which you can do at home, is to try to compost your organic waste rather than send it to landfill. That's another possibility. Okay, and then finally, number 3, removal, cleanup. When we look at evaluating these things, probably the last thing you want to have to do is remove the pollution once it's occurred. You want to try and stop it happening in the first place. So in some ways, removal is a last resort. So you could remove the nutrients that are present in the water by precipitation, similar to what I said before about sewage works. You could remove sediments that contain a lot of nutrients by dredging, scooping up the sediment from the bottom of rivers. And then finally, quite an interesting one, you could try to restore the original ecosystem by doing things like removing predatory fish that have entered by an imbalance in an ecosystem and trying to restore the ecosystem that was there before. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. That really was a short one for me today. I know it's an overused phrase, but it is kind of common sense. But the one thing I want you to take away from this is, well, basically the 3 things I want you to take away from this video are the 3 strategies of reduction of pollution, regulation of pollution, and removal of pollution. And we need to apply it to other examples and other case studies. All right, take care everybody, and see you in the class.